Hey, so I just wanted to take a few minutes to give you a little backs of my backstory, a little of my food history, because I know that we're all in different places when it comes to food and our relationship with it. And so I wanted to share my story. I grew up in a home that we lived on a fruit orchard, and there was a lot of wonderful food that I was surrounded with, but I was also in an environment where my mom was constantly obsessing about her weight. And weight is something that she had struggled with her whole life. So I grew up seeing food as something to kind of battle against. I saw her battling against it. And from an early age, it instilled in me this idea that food was something to be conquered, that if you fought that battle correctly, you could win and you wouldn't be overweight. So I decided that the best way to battle against food would be to start early and to start strong. So from the time that I was pretty young, I had this idea that food was my enemy and I needed to just figure out a battle strategy to conquer it. So I watched my mom pretty closely to see what some of her tactics were, and she tried a lot of different things. And so as she tried things, I would try things kind of in the shadow without her realizing it. And so I remember sneaking some herbal diet supplements, and I remember trying to fast and doing smoothies or juicing and eliminating certain food groups and different things like that. And unfortunately, all of this was just creating this mindset that was very unhealthy because at this point in my life, I was I was in third grade is the earliest that I remember really having a time stamp on some of these thoughts. And I wasn't overweight. I wasn't in a position where I even needed to be wrestling with these thoughts. But because it was in my environment, I sort of acquired it. I continued to be mindful and self conscious of the foods that I ate throughout my elementary and high school years. And then I think as I started um, developing hormonally and gaining some weight, I started feeling even more self conscious. And I remember a comment being made to me at one point in school by a male classmate that if you were just 10 pounds lighter, you'd be just about perfect. And I don't even remember who said it, but that statement really sunk down into my heart. And I thought, okay, so someone else sees that what I'm seeing, like I need to take this seriously. So I continued to carry these thoughts and this mental battle with me into college. And in college, I had new fears because I had heard that it was pretty common for freshmen to gain 15 pounds. And I really didn't want that to be my story. But our dorm situation was such that I didn't have a kitchen to make my own food. And so I had to go to the cafeteria, and the options there weren't very healthy. And I did end up gaining weight. And then it became an even more urgent need because I just felt like this self-fulfilling prophecy. I was gonna turn into my mom. I was gonna have this weight problem, and I knew it, and I've been trying so hard to avoid it. And so I felt like I needed to step up my game. So I got a campus job working in the athletic department and started taking step aerobic classes, and I really enjoyed them. I started being an instructor for the water aerobics class, and I enjoyed that too. But unfortunately, even though I enjoyed it, I was using it as in a way to try to overcompensate for everything that I put in my mouth. So my goal was to exercise off everything that I ate. And so it became an obsession with me, and I would work out multiple times a day. Then I had a new friend that I met, and she was also unhealthy in the way that she was thinking about food, and we started discussing our desires to lose weight, and she started sharing with me things that were that she was trying, and so I started thinking maybe I just needed to change tactics. And so she was using laxatives and binging and purging her food, and I'd never tried this. I knew that it wasn't really healthy, but I thought maybe it would be worth it for the outcome. And I wanted to be skinny. I wanted to look on the outside how I felt. I guess was what was socially expected of me. And so I bought my first box of laxatives, and I remember trying that and how disruptive and uncomfortable to my day it was. But in my mind, I'm thinking, but maybe this is just what it takes. Maybe this is what I have to do. And then starting down this cycle of um, trying to abstain from food as much as I could. And then I would get to a point where I was so hungry, then I would binge on a bunch of food. I'd feel terribly guilty, and then I started feeling like maybe throwing up was the right way to go. So I remember having a really hard time figuring out how to do that. But once I did, I had my tactic down and the time that I would do it and the way that I would do it. And so I was feeling pretty good about it because I felt like I knew enough about what could go wrong, of why this could be a really dangerous thing, and I was going to try to do it in a healthy way. So um, ironically, I was going to try and do it right, the healthy way. So this continued for a while, and then one afternoon I missed a concert of a friend that I had committed to be at because I was purging, and it took longer than I expected to. And it really rocked me that now food was taking away parts of my life that I wasn't willing to give up, like my social activities. And so things didn't change right away, but that was a turning point for me mentally, that I realized I wasn't as in control of the situation as I thought I was. And so sometime later, Trent, my husband now, we met on campus, and we started getting to know each other, and we got to a point in our friendship that I felt comfortable sharing this struggle that I had. And he was a good listener, and he wanted to help. And it wasn't something he could personally relate to, but we ended up, through discussion, coming up with an accountability agreement that he would give up his social smoking if I would give up my unhealthy eating habits. And so we agreed to that, and that to me was a beginning point of my recovery in that area, because now I had someone who cared enough about me and that I cared enough to let into my secret, so to speak. And so I started making different choices, and I started trying to change how I saw food, but it was hard because I still saw food as an enemy. The summer before we got married, I moved in with his parents because we got married in the Midwest. I was from Washington State, and I lived with his parents for the few months leading up to our wedding, and I was then subject to whatever foods they cooked for me, and I didn't have control anymore in the kitchen like I was used to having. And I had several months where I just had to eat whatever they gave me, and I realized that I wasn't gaining weight like I thought I would. The control was taken away, and I wasn't getting out of control with my weight. And so that was a second realization for me. One, how helpful accountability is. Two, that food is not necessarily something that is out of control. It was so much more in my mind than I realized than an actual problem. I also had to get to a place over time where I was able to separate who I was, who I was created to be, who God saw me as, from what I looked like on the outside or what I consumed. Because those were so closely linked that I felt like um, my value was wrapped up in my physical appearance. And so it took a lot of healing and discovery of who God saw me as and who I was created to be able to start separating the two, which was an important distinction because later when I became pregnant and now your body gains weight without your permission and kind of um, regardless of how good or bad you eat, you're going to gain weight. And so I was nervous during that time of how my thoughts would be and how that might, if it would cause me to go in a recessive direction with my attitude toward food. But I found that I was at a place in my healing where I saw myself as uniquely created and that I was beautiful in God's sight and that I was unique and I had giftings and I had abilities and all of these things were not dependent on my appearance and were not dependent on my weight. So it allowed me to kind of see that I was indeed in a healthy place. So my attitude toward food has changed dramatically in the last 20 years or so to from a place where I saw food as my enemy, to be conquered or rid of somehow completely, to seeing food as my fuel. And during that time, between seeing that transition of food, I started to really get interested in learning about food and learning about what foods are best and what foods will be the biggest benefit to me and what foods are most nutritionally dense and how do I prepare them in the best way and how do I enjoy them to the fullest. And so that has been something that I have really shifted my focus into. And in college, I ended up adding a nutrition minor, and I've loved digging into things like learning about traditional methods of cooking food and fermenting and just how God really designed food in a way to nourish us and benefit us, but also how that has been affected and changed by our modern farming practices and things like that. So I feel so grateful to be free from the bondage that I was in before, and it encourages me to now be able to share my story with others who might have come from a similar place or might understand what it's like to be in a place where you're so consumed with food or your weight that you are prevented from really enjoying the life that you have been given. So I want to encourage you that wherever you are at in your relationship with food, it can get better. There is more to learn. There is more to enjoy and appreciate about the foods that we have been given. There's always more to learn, but if you are in a place where you're struggling, you do not have to stay in that place. And accountability was key for me, and I want you to know that I'm a safe place to reach out to, and if I can't give you the tools you need, I will work to get those for you. And maybe someday you will be in a place where your story can be shared and can be used to reach out for others as well. And if you have a story with food and your struggle with it, and hopefully the way that you've overcome it or that you are overcoming it, I would encourage you to share that story and to allow it to be used because God has a wonderful way of taking painful parts of our life and turning it into blessings when we are able to walk through that in a spirit of transparency. So thank you for hearing my story, and thank you for being part of it.